we have a raisin that is covered in chocolate here. You see it? And we have five of them here. Okay, so I just bought them because I want to, four? I think there's a fifth one. So we've got 5 of them. All right, there they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The only reason I'm not gonna eat them now because I have a couple more hours to go in my fast. So there's 5 of them here, and I got them because I want to experience the taste of it. Okay, the taste of the raisins covered with delicious chocolate. Okay, I've tried this before. It tastes very good, and I was in the grocery store today and I said, I'm feeling that taste. I want to experience that taste. Okay? Now, here is the problem that many people get caught in. Okay? That we have all found ourselves caught in numerous times. So, if I eat this right now, it's going to be pretty good. Okay, it's got raisins and covered with chocolate. That's pretty good. That's really good. Okay, so I'll have a bite, I'll eat it. That's pretty good. I'll have a second one and I'll eat it. That's pretty good. The third one comes in. That's very good. And then fourth one comes in. Still the head nod in approval, just not as intense as the first bite. And by the fifth bite, still a head nod, mind you, still good. I'm there, I'm tasting it, it's very good. But the head nod isn't as strong as that first bite, that's first and second, let's say. Okay, nothing beats the first bite. And the problem is when we when we chase that feeling that the food gives us in that first bite. And basically we're chasing a mirage here. We're chasing, really, it's like you're chasing a mirage. Okay, it does not exist. It's an illusion, meaning you're not going to be able to recreate the taste of the first bite unless you deprive yourself out of that particular thing for some time. So you say you come back and you eat it tomorrow, then there's that first bite feeling to it again. You see? But if you're sitting down and eating something, just understand, see, the reason why I only got 5, there's only 5 of them, okay? It's because I know that this is all that this is not a source of energy, it is not a source of nourishment by any means. I want the taste, and I know this is all that it takes for me to experience the pleasurable sensations that come from the taste of this particular food. That's all. Anything else I eat beyond it, I'm basically in the illusion now. Now I'm caught chasing my own tail. Really, I'm like anything beyond these 5 raisins. Okay, chocolate covered raisins. Anything beyond that, I'm now chasing my tail. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to recreate that experience of that first bite again. And of course, what happens is we keep eating because we want to recreate the feeling of that first bite. And we keep eating, and then we run into all kinds of issues. Right, all kinds of issues, and then we stop eating because we're just so full because our stomachs can't take it anymore, and God help your digestive system now that has to deal with all this food, and then you come back a few hours later because you want to recreate the feeling of that first bite. So you deprive yourself out of the food for whatever, few hours until you feel hungry again, hungry quote unquote. You're probably not hungry, you're just craving out of boredom or emotions. We mostly eat out of boredom and emotional eating or boredom. And then you start to indulge yourself in your favorite food again. Or what happens is this is crazy, right? Mixing up too many foods and too many tastes. So what ends up happening is this. Say I got 5 chocolate covered or raisins covered with chocolate, okay? What's the word for them? Yeah, chocolate covered raisins, okay? So, and say I have peanut butter here. And say I have, I don't know, a couple of dates, 3 dates maybe. Okay, or 3 dried figs. And I eat this, and I was like, it's pretty good. Okay, we tasted it. And then you move on to a different taste, because you want a different taste. You had a sweet taste here. And you go for the peanut butter, for almonds or almond butter. Almond butter is really, really terrific. And you have like a few tablespoons, and you're like, this is delicious. And then you're like, okay, I understand that this is enough. And then you move on to the next one. You have dried figs. You eat 3-4 of them. It's pretty good. And now you're caught in this vicious circle. You just go on chasing your tail. Because now you crave for the next taste, and for the next sip, for the next rush, for the next rush, for the next rush. It's never ending. It's never ending. So, what is the solution to this epidemic, rather? This is an epidemic. Obesity is at an all-time high. And believe it or not, even in third world countries, some of them are having obesity issues. Okay? Because they're eating all the wrong foods, even though they're not eating much, but they're eating all the wrong foods, and it's messing up their bodies and metabolism, etc. But what is the solution for this? How do we deal with this slavery? This is a slavery. Food could end up being your slave master in many ways. Well, first of all, awareness is transformative. By being aware that I am here because I want to taste this, and all that I need to get the taste, the full experience of the taste, is just a few bites of really anything. If you want to get a taste of anything, you need just a few bites, and you got the taste, you got the experience of the taste. Anything beyond that, again, that's you're caught in a tragically comical cycle of chasing your own tail, of chasing a mirage, an illusion, of trying to replicate that first bite again. So, first of all, awareness. Awareness is transformative. By being aware that this is what's happening, this is the way the program is playing itself out. And I could rise above that program. I could either install a new program or uninstall this one. And so we'll peel this like layers of onions. So this is the superficial layer of the onion. The first superficial layer is awareness is transformative. But you want to go even deeper. And the second layer of the onion is get a life. Get a life. Okay? Get a life. Food is the most superficial source of pleasure. One of the most superficial sources of pleasure. It's very transient. I mean, look, these are going to be delicious. I'm going to sit there for them and really enjoy them. But it's very transient. Within a minute or two, that taste will start to dissipate in my mouth. And then within 5 minutes, it'll be like it's gone. Like nothing. Like as if I didn't even eat it. Okay, so this is food is one of the most superficial sources of pleasure. So then, pleasure is the law. We are pleasure-seeking creatures. We are pleasure. The Hindus, they describe this nature of self as Sat Chit Ananda, absolute knowledge, absolute existence, Ananda, absolute bliss. Okay, we're pleasure-seeking, pleasure-oriented creatures, and everything is. Every creature, every sentient being is. Because that's consciousness. Consciousness itself is bliss. Okay? So, start to seek higher pleasures. Start to entertain yourselves with higher pleasures. For example, the pleasure of dancing. One thing, as I start to eat less and less, and as I start to, transform into a breatharian, which is living off the energy, the prana, living off the air and the oxygen in the atmosphere and the sun, and needing very little to no food. I'm in the process in transforming. And as I start to see myself, restricting myself to eat and sort of getting these other forms, subtler forms of energy, I'm having to seek higher pleasures. So dancing is one thing I do now. I've got a room over there, like a big room, and yeah, it's got nice lighting, so I dance. I'll go put on music and dance for half an hour, 45 minutes, and that gives me a lot of pleasure. Definitely more pleasure than these 5 raisins do. Believe me, a lot more pleasure. The energy flows, the chi flows, the dancing is nice, there's flow, there's movement, there's, flow. Life is about flow, the Shakti energy, the Shakti likes to move. Okay, energy likes to flow. So with dancing, it's a higher form of pleasure that actually carries on. Meaning, you do a bout of dancing. I do this in the morning, and then I get going. I go for a walk. I'm talking to people. I'm, making videos. So it actually sort of keeps the Shakti moving, keeps the energy moving. Okay, it's a higher form of pleasure than chocolate. Okay, it is. This is a superficial source of pleasure. Okay, just recognize that. So get a life. Seek things that give you higher pleasure, higher sense of well-being. You know what else gives you pleasure? Helping people. Go and volunteer, or I don't know, do something. So, just go help people. Just again, remember, don't get caught in the trap of a helper. Don't have a story about it. Just go help people, because it is what you do. It is it is what is done, right? It isn't because you're a good person or anything. Just do it. It feels good. We're pleasure-seeking beings, okay? So it definitely gives you higher pleasure than chocolate or any food will. Okay, it really will. So yeah, there's a lot of higher forms of pleasure, reading a book, listening to a lecture, learning about something that really fascinates you, walking, hiking, being in nature, having a conversation with a friend. Lots of ways of higher pleasures. But of course, even that is transient. So if this gives me pleasure and by 5 minutes it'll be gone, the taste will even be gone within 5 minutes, well, dancing might carry me for a few hours. A nice conversation with someone might carry me for 5 hours or something. I feel energized after, it's a high form of pleasure, but even that's transient, okay? Now we're peeling the onion. Now we're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the root cause of all our addictions, of all our neurotic habits of trying to seek pleasure externally to ourselves. Dancing, having a conversation with someone, going out for a hike, being in nature, enjoying yourself like that, still seeking the external. Still things that are much more rewarding, and they have a much longer lasting effect in terms of well-being and pleasure. At the end of the day, pleasure is the law. Then say food. Okay, so you do lots of that. Make sure you fill up your time with these higher sources of pleasure, and ultimately you start to realize that these are flickering pleasures too. They sort of come and go, and they come and go, and they come and go. Then you're left with no choice but to sit down and meditate. You're really left with no choice but to sit down, close your eyes, and you use the external world to help you get into the internal. Meaning there is no comparison to my meditations when I meditate in my room as opposed to meditating in nature. No way. When I'm in nature is meditative. It's like boom, the vibe of nature, boom, right away I'm in a meditative state. In my room, it takes a lot of clearing up and humming and on, because the air quality isn't as good, it's stale. there isn't as much life force around me. So you use the external world to ultimately get into the internal world, which is infinite pleasure. That's why we're pleasure-seeking beings here. You have to understand. We're pleasure-seeking beings because we are playing this game of evolution of consciousness where we get lost in the illusion of separation and we come back to the source. And the source is Sat Chit Ananda. Absolute knowledge, absolute existence, absolute bliss. So you have to understand you are bliss. And once you go deep within you and you start to live, experience your truth, experience that Ananda, that bliss, that joy, that pleasure, then you have an infinite supply of it. You have an infinite supply of it. Why do you think breatharians, people who live off the prana, to them this is like it's a child's play. This is a child play form of energy, of pleasure. Why do you think master yogis go and basically drop out of society? Barely eat any food, meditate all day? There's gotta be a reason why these people are doing it, you see. Before, I used to think, they're renounced, they're not having sex, they're not eating. What kind of pleasure are they having? What kind of life is this? You go retire to a cave? And, come on. But you gotta understand, these guys are experiencing all the pleasure you could ever imagine, and it's infinite, and it's right here. And they go within. And so use the external world to help you set a better environment to go within. And since, as far as the external world is concerned, nature is the purest, the closest thing to purity. That is the closest thing to the light, the closest thing to consciousness, to the source. Then you go, you do like so many people do. You go into nature, you meditate, and you start to find that place inside of you, that Sat Chit Ananda, that pleasure, that infinite pleasure. Infinite love, infinite light. And then these things become a joke to you. Like 2 minutes of pleasure, like really? How finite is this compared to the infinite? That is you, it is you. I mean it when I say it is your essence, it is who you are. Okay? And that, my friends, is the root cause of all our neurotic behaviors, all our addictions, and all our pleasure-seeking habits and behavior that really leads us to trouble a lot of times. I mean, overeating is a huge problem. Right? It is a huge problem. And so that you have to recognize that you're programmed to seek pleasure for a reason. That is an indication. These smaller forms of desire, smaller pleasures, are the attempt of the ego, the finite ego. See, because the ego is finite. The ego is your physical body, and it's your psychological identity. It is the attempt of your finite ego to reach the light via finite means, like food, for example. You see that it really comes down to finity and infinity. The ego is playing out this part, your physical body, your psychological identity, as I'm a separate entity that is born and that dies. But once you start to rise above that, and the way you rise above it, you start to experience yourself as Brahman, as infinity, as consciousness. And this is a joke. This is a joke, ladies and gentlemen. This is a joke. Okay, all these little minute, even sex, even the pleasure from sex is a joke. It is a joke. Why do you think Muhammad, when he wanted to describe what heaven is like to, the desert people, he said, you're going to have 72 versions. Now, you have to understand something here. Understand something. The Arabs, see, I grew up as an Arab, okay? The Arabs back in the day, they spoke in metaphors and poetry. That's all they did. And so much of the misinterpretation of Muslim scripture and everything Muhammad said is because people nowadays don't do that. They don't speak in poetry, they don't speak in metaphors. But that's all people did back then. And people now take everything literally. So when Muhammad told, his followers that, when you go to heaven, you're going to have 72 versions, he was speaking in metaphors like everybody else did in those times. They almost never spoke literally. That was their way of speaking. And what a beautiful poetic way it is. And he was trying to attempt to describe to somebody who is a shepherd, right, what it feels like to be in heaven. And Muhammad understands, well, most of these people, some of them are burying their daughters, their baby daughters, because they're not baby boys. He understands their level of consciousness is so low, so he has to explain it in a way that is enticing for a 6th century, 7th century shepherd. Okay, so he says you're going to have 72 versions. And I don't think the people on the other side are thinking I'm going to have 72 versions, but to them it's like, wow, is that what heaven feels like? Because they understand that's a metaphor he's trying to describe to them. The more and more you get into this place, the more and more you dig into it and feel it and experience it, then these things, they become a joke. They really do. They really do. They really just become like, oh, really another rush. And here I am, another rush, okay? But at least I'm aware now, I'm aware. So I grab these, I'm not at all looking at this as, oh my God, I'm not even really, to be honest, I'm not even really looking forward all that much to eat them. When I eat them, I'm going to be there for them, enjoying them, tasting them, eating them. But what I'm looking for more than anything today, I'll tell you, is sitting down and listening to Sufi music and really going into an altered state. Because I could get to experience some of that Satchit Ananda. I could really go within and listen to the music and really immerse myself fully into it. And the Sufis are masters when it comes to that, getting you into a mystical union, okay? And their music is just unbelievable. That, I'm looking forward for that pleasure today more, than say 5 chocolate-covered raisins. You see? And yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, and that's a good way of dealing with all your neurotic food patterns and behaviors and addictions and programs. Is not to focus on the darkness, but to bring in the light. That's why I said let's peel it a little bit at a time. Start off being aware that this isn't going to bring you any happiness and it's very transient. Don't stop your behavior. Eat what you want. Just awareness itself will make you eat less of that food because you realize that all I want is the taste. I got the taste now. Why else am I eating for? Then the second layer is you start to seek higher pleasures. Things like dancing, things like walking, hiking, conversations with people, etc. Making videos. For me, this is a source of pleasure to make videos. It's a higher source of pleasure. By the time I'm done making these videos, it'll probably be like at least an hour and a half. I'm gonna make like 3 today, be like an hour and a half. That's an hour and a half that I could have spent like, oh shit, I'm getting hungry, oh I want these raisins. But actually the reason why I'm not even that attracted to them right now, because I'm talking here, there's a higher form of pleasure going on here. And then the third layer is you once you start to seek these higher forms of pleasure, because we're bringing in the light here, we're trying to bring in the light. That's how you get rid of darkness. You don't just like, oh, I'm not gonna eat this anymore. That never works. Never, ever, ever works. That's repression. Never works. I'm never gonna have sex again. Never works. Never works. Never works. None of it ever works. But what you do is you bring in the light. You start to bring in the light. So you seek higher forms of pleasure. And then you use these higher forms of pleasure to direct you inwards, because the journey is ultimately inwards. Okay, you use music, you use even sex. Sex is a superficial form of pleasure. Really, just it is on the same level as food actually. Maybe a bit higher, but it's a superficial. But then you could take it into higher by having love in sex. If sex is just sex, it's just like food. Now, if sex is with love, that's a higher form of pleasure. That's like, again, in the same boat as sitting in nature, enjoying beauty, enjoying, feeling love. And then you go even deeper. You start to use these things, these higher forms of pleasure, as ways of finally going inwards. Okay, going inwards, yoga, union. And once you do that, then you're now free. Vivekananda says, either Vivekananda or Yogananda, I think Vivekananda, he says that the purpose of man, woman, the purpose of humans is to rise above the laws of nature. Because we are conscious. See, animals can't rise above the laws of nature. They're just total programs running off. There's still consciousness, there's still Brahman, there's still the same awareness. But they're in a particular stage in their development where now they're serving their time as an animal. The animal is one of the lower realms. As I will remind you from the 31 places of existence that we discussed about Buddhism. So they're programmed, they're not conscious, they can't meditate. They can't sit down and rise above their programming and really fully be God realized. Humans can. That's why in Buddhism, this is such a precious thing. The Buddhists always tell you, this is a precious thing. Don't waste this time. Don't waste this lifetime. Don't waste this incarnation. Find out who you really are. Sit down and find out who you really are. And yeah, that's really the journey ends up being the journey going inwards, peeling off the onion. And then you rise above the laws of nature, you rise above everything, then you're no longer, really, if you're always at the whim of your cravings to food, you're a slave. You're absolutely a slave. You are a slave. You just like animals in a way are, because a lion just, I'm hungry, I gotta go kill and eat. They do not have the capacity to contemplate and reflect and meditate as human beings do. Because human beings, as far as the evolution of consciousness, are higher up on the ladder. It's very obvious. So, and that's why we have God-realized beings like Jesus and Buddha. And I'm sure even in the animal realm, like there are stories of Buddha. Incarnating as a frog, Siddhartha Gautama, right? Siddhartha Gautama. As the Bodhisattva before his final enlightenment. And he reincarnated as a frog, he reincarnated as a mouse, he reincarnated as different forms of animals. So even in the animal realm, you will have enlightened beings incarnated in that animal realm. But I'm talking about the majority of the animal realm, the majority of the human beings. Human beings have a much better chance of being God realized. And so things like that, the fact that we're aware of it now, and the fact that you're aware of what's happening here, what's the programming, it means you could begin to change it. And nothing happens over time like this. You can begin to change it, work with it, and change it, and bring in the light, higher forms of pleasure. And then start to meditate, and you go inwards and inwards and inwards. And then once you go inwards, that's it. You got it all. It's a grand illusion. The grand illusion is there. As long as you think there's an external thing that's going to make you happy, that's the grand illusion. That's the illusion. That's what Brahman. That's the game. That there's something external of me that's going to make me happy. That's not what it is. You could use your external environment to set up a proper environment that closely matches the inner, such as nature, to finally go within, finally attain yourself, becomes God realized, attain Satchit Ananda, absolute knowledge, absolute bliss, absolute existence. Okay? This was a fun video to make. I would like to thank all the Patreons for supporting this channel. And we've got a few newcomers to the Patreon family, so I want to thank you guys very much for your support. It really means quite a lot to me that you find my videos appealing and so insightful that you'd actually be willing to support. That's amazing. That's fantastic. I would love to do this full time at some point. Okay, and the more people we can have helping on Patreon with as little as $2 a month, really, like that's barely any strain on the wallet. Okay, you do as little as $2. There's options 2, 5, 10, but some as little as 2. Anything would be appreciated. And that's about it. Until next time, may the force be with you.